Wall Street is completely mispricing the AI boom. Right now, global AI investment is on track to top $2.5 trillion a year. But behind closed doors, institutional capital is preparing for a sector rotation of historic size, and the pivot is pointed at 2027. The cloud software layer is heading for what I will call its Linux moment, the same way open source Linux crushed Microsoft's server pricing power in the late 90s. And at the exact same time, a parallel supercycle in physical AI, autonomous vehicles, optics, edge memory is about to lock in $1 trillion of demand. If you are heavy in closed source foundation models or pure play cloud infrastructure, you are sitting on a ticking time bomb. If you know where the capital is actually moving, you are looking at a generational wealth transfer. Here is the real-world data you need to see before 2027 arrives. To understand the coming crash, look at the software layer's Linux moment. In the late 90s, Microsoft thought Windows Server would run the entire internet. Then, Linux arrived. Open source, free, good enough, and Microsoft's server pricing power evaporated. Today, Chinese open source AI is doing the exact same thing to the American frontier model oligopoly. Look at the API pricing in the second quarter of 2026. OpenAI's GPT-5 charges $2.50 per 1 million input tokens. DeepSeek's V4 Flash, matching quality, open weights, charges 14 cents. With prompt cache hits, that drops to under 0.3 cents. That is a roughly 18 times discount on the headline number, and 1,000 times discount on cache traffic. And the market is responding. By March 2026, open weights served roughly 1/3 of all tokens on OpenRouter. Linux Foundation data. 89% of organizations now use some open source AI in their stack, and the primary inference share for open models jumped from 23% to 67% in a single year. The capability gap to the top closed models is now just 3.3%. The question is no longer whether open models are good enough, it's what each workload needs. Here is the valuation trap. The market is pricing OpenAI for perpetual exponential revenue growth, and OpenAI is delivering on revenue. The company tripled sales to $13.1 billion in 2025, and it expects $30 billion in 2026. But the cash burn is exploding faster than the revenue. OpenAI's own internal documents, leaked via The Information and reported by the Wall Street Journal, now project a $25 billion cash burn in 2026, $57 billion in 2027, and a cumulative $665 billion through 2030. That is a $111 billion upward revision in a single quarter. Anthropic, by contrast, is forecasting a burn rate of just 9% of revenue by 2027 and a break-even in 2028. It overtook OpenAI in annualized run rate in April 2026. When the closed source giants eventually IPO, the public market will see this gap in capital efficiency for the first time, and that is the moment the software narrative cracks. But the software layer is only half the story. The other half is a $600 billion capital expenditure mismatch. The big five hyperscalers, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Meta, and Oracle, are spending between $600 and $725 billion on infrastructure in 2026, roughly 75% of it on AI. That is double the 2025 level. Microsoft alone is at $190 billion, Amazon at $200, Meta at $130, Alphabet at $180. The problem is how it is being funded. Tech sector interest-bearing debt is already past $1.35 trillion, and JP Morgan estimates AI-related debt financing will reach $4.1 trillion by 2030. The fatal mismatch. Hyperscalers are issuing 10-year bonds to buy cloud GPUs that have a 3 to 5 year useful life. If the software application layer cannot generate the cash flow to service this hardware, because open source just drove the price of intelligence to near zero, who pays the bill? That is the setup for violent flash bear corrections in cloud infrastructure stocks. Now the bullish pivot. The bear case assumes AI is just chatbots and code generators racing to the bottom. They are completely missing physical AI. While Silicon Valley fights over text generation pricing, the real, defendable monetization is happening in the physical world. Look at the regulation landing in 2027. China's MIIT rules for Level 3 and Level 4 autonomous driving become mandatory on July 1st, 2027. The EU's Unified Autonomous Vehicle Act takes effect January 2027, approving Level 3 block-wide at 130 kilometers an hour. But the deployment picture is bifurcated. In 2026, Mercedes paused its Drive Pilot L3 system, and BMW discontinued its Personal Pilot L3 entirely, calling the use cases too narrow. Meanwhile, in China, BYD, NIO, Li Auto, Huawei, Cancun, they are accelerating. China's passenger car LiDAR installation rate hit 18.5% in December 2025, with 3.21 million units installed in 2025, up 110% year over year. The global automotive LiDAR market is on track from $1.6 billion in 2026 to over $11 billion by 2033, a 32% compound rate. But here is what most people miss. None of this scales without a physical supply chain that is already breaking. Building autonomous fleets and edge AI hardware is throttled by memory. TrendForce data. Conventional DRAM contract prices rose 90 to 95% quarter over quarter in Q1 2026. NAND flash rose 50 to 60%, and Q2 is accelerating on NAND 70 to 75%. Gartner puts the H1 2026 surge at 50 to 200% depending on the part. Why? The three memory makers, SK Hynix, Samsung, Micron, have shifted wafer capacity to high bandwidth memory for AI accelerators. SK Hynix has already sold out its entire 2026 RAM production. Micron CEO expects tightness to continue into 2027. New fab capacity does not reach meaningful volume until late 2027 or 2028. That is a structural, not cyclical shortage, and it is a moat for every company that already has locked-in memory supply. Smart Capital is also watching macro indicators that have nothing to do with software. The Baltic Dry Index, the global shipping benchmark for raw materials, hit 2,910 points on July 9, 2026, up 98.6% year over year. That is a real-time read on how hard it is to move the physical inputs of the physical AI economy. Lithium, cobalt, optical glass, semiconductor wafers, robotics. Capesize daily earnings crossed $25,929. Iron ore and coal routes are tight. The macro bottleneck is real. So here is the playbook for 2027. First, reduce exposure to premium closed-source foundation models ahead of their IPOs. The open-source price war will keep compressing their gross margin. Second, pivot to orchestration. B platforms that do not train models but route every task to the cheapest capable open model. Those businesses will thrive. Third, accumulate physical AI and the supply chain that feeds it. Optical technology, automotive lenses, edge memory, DRAM, NAND, HBM, and the semiconductor suppliers locked into long-term agreements. Diversify geographically. The physical AI capex is happening fastest in China, in Korea, in Taiwan, not in California. The winners will be the suppliers with the longest customer commitment books, not the ones with the loudest keynote demos. AI is a generational shift, but capturing financial value means knowing where the pricing power actually lives. The Linux moment for software is here, and the physical AI supercycle is just beginning. Prepare for volatility, rotate capital into the supply chain, and do not get caught holding the bag on pure cloud hype in 2027. If this research was useful, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, are you betting on cloud software or on physical AI hardware? See you in the next one.